It started like any other crisp Thursday. Students rushed between classrooms. The morning bell echoed off the walls of Clarendon Elementary, and the scent of cut grass lingered in the air. But within moments, everything shifted. Rex, the newly assigned canine officer, froze near the teacher's lot, nose lifted, body tense, eyes locked on something no one else could see. What he uncovered next would shake the entire town. If you believe dogs see what we often miss, like and subscribe, because this story isn't just about instincts. It's about the truth that refused to stay buried. The day began like any other Tuesday at Clarendon Elementary. The playground buzzed with the sound of sneakers slapping pavement, the rhythmic creak of swings in motion, and the occasional whistle of a teacher urging kids to stay within bounds. Spring had finally arrived in Riversfield, and the sun poured over the cracked blacktop like warm syrup. Most children didn't notice the newly assigned K9 unit lingering near the school gate. Officer Lynn hadn't planned to bring Rex onto the playground that day. The 5-year-old Belgian Malinois had just been transferred from a regional missing persons task force to community outreach detail, a softer post meant to help him transition from high-stress fieldwork. She had only unclipped his leash for a minute, just long enough to jot something into her field log while Rex sat beside the basketball court, his eyes scanning calmly. But something shifted. Without a growl, without warning, Rex surged forward. "Rex!" Officer Lynn shouted, startled. But the dog didn't flinch. His body moved like a launched arrow, precise and fast. He dashed past the jungle gym and the row of tetherball poles, ignoring the whistles, the sudden gasps from students, the scrambling teachers. He cut a direct path to the far corner of the playground where the grass gave way to a neglected storage shed with weather-worn siding and a rusted latch. Nobody had gone near that part of the yard in years. Some of the older students whispered it was haunted, while the newer kids simply avoided it. It was a dead space, overshadowed by a sagging oak tree and the chain-link fence that bordered the back of the school. But that's exactly where Rex ran, his hackles rising, his ears locked forward. By the time Lynn caught up to him, Rex was already pawing furiously at the dry soil just a foot away from the shed's side wall. His snout dove deep, snorting dust, his movements urgent. Bark, scratch, bark, 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 bark. His claws scraped like knives against the earth, sending tufts of grass and dirt flying. Rex ignored her. He let out a sharp, deep bark, then resumed digging with growing desperation. Several kids had stopped playing to watch. A ball rolled to a halt. A teacher dropped her coffee. Dean Harper, a quiet fourth grader with a hand-me-down phone in his pocket, had started filming. He liked Rex, had even petted him during the dog's first introduction assembly. Something about the way Rex moved now, like he was chasing something invisible and buried, made Dean freeze. And as, through the shimmer of dust stirred by Rex's claws, Dean caught sight of a figure. Just beyond the chain-link fence, half obscured by trees and sun glare, stood a man. At first glance, he looked like a jogger, maybe a parent. But the more Dean stared, the more wrong it felt. The man wore a hood pulled too low for the sunny weather. His gaze wasn't on the playground. It was locked directly onto Rex. Dean raised his phone a little higher and zoomed in. But by the time the image stabilized, the man had vanished. Startled, Dean turned toward the nearest adult, but Officer Lynn had her back to him, still focused on Rex. The school counselor, Ms. Doran, finally arrived, huffing from across the field. "What's going on? Why is he?" Her voice trailed off as she saw the dog. Rex had dug nearly a foot down by now and refused to stop. His barks were no longer sharp. They were drawn out, agonized, as if trying to say something nobody else could understand. "Something's under there," Lynn muttered. "He's never done this." Mrs. Doran knelt slowly, peering at the hole. "Is he trained for scent detection?" "Yeah," Lynn replied. "Missing persons. Human remains." The words hung in the air like smoke. Dean, still recording, whispered, "I saw someone. Behind the fence." Officer Lynn turned. "What?" Dean replayed the video for her. In the shaky footage, the man's silhouette was faint but real. She paused it, staring. "We need to get this area secured," Lynn said grimly. Within minutes, the school principal was notified. Teachers were instructed to guide students quietly back into the building. A yellow rope was stretched around the perimeter. Rex, finally leashed again, whined and scratched at the air toward the hole, unable to sit still. One of the maintenance staff brought over a spade. At Len's direction, he began to dig where Rex had clawed. 5 inches deeper, the shovel hit something soft with a thud. Everyone watching went still. It was a cloth, faded pink, and when unearthed, it revealed the toe of a tiny shoe. A child's shoe, with a butterfly sticker still clinging to the side. Officer Lin whispered under her breath, "This isn't just a random discovery." Inside the main building, the footage Dean had captured was transferred to a secure police laptop. A tech team began running facial recognition on the blurry image of the man by the fence. At the same time, Principal Drayton called a staff meeting. "Until we know more, we say nothing. Nothing goes to the press. Parents will ask questions, we stick to protocol." But word was already spreading. A few kids had seen the shoe. A teacher whispered the name. Wasn't there a girl who disappeared? May? In a town like Riversfield, memory could be short, but for some, like the custodian who'd worked there since 2004, it never faded. He murmured to himself as he walked past the taped-off area. "I remember that shoe. I cleaned the gym the day she vanished." Inside the principal's office, Lynn turned off Dean's video and leaned in. "I need to talk to your IT department, and you should prep the school counselor." "Why? Because something's waking up here," she said, staring at the paused image on Dean's phone. "And this dog, he just started the avalanche." The discovery of the child's shoe had already rattled the school, but what came next cracked the air like a thunderclap. As the forensic team gently removed the surrounding dirt, another object emerged from the soil. Small, heart-shaped, dulled by time, its silver surface tarnished but unmistakably engraved. Officer Lin crouched low, brushing it clean with her gloved fingertips. A delicate locket. As soon as she turned it over, the words etched into the back sent a chill through her spine. "To Amy, with love, Mom." Principal Drayton, standing a few feet away, exhaled sharply. "It can't be," he muttered, though the evidence in Lynn's palm left little room for doubt. 7 years ago, Amy Bellerose, a quiet second grader with a love for butterflies and building block puzzles, vanished during recess. No one had seen her leave. No alarm had been triggered. Her name had slowly faded into myth among the newer students. But for Riversfield's older generation, it was a scar no one dared touch. Officer Lin didn't speak as she dropped the locket into an evidence bag and signaled for the rest of the area to be closed off. Rex sat near the edge of the dig site, his ears alert but his body still. Eyes trained not on the ground, but on something unseen beyond the fence line. That same morning in classroom 1C, Mila Benton stared blankly at the window. She was a quiet child, not particularly social, the kind of student teachers described as gentle but peculiar. She had transferred to Clarendon Elementary only last fall, after her family relocated from a neighboring town. Miss Doran, the school counselor, had been keeping an eye on Mila ever since. It wasn't that the girl was disruptive. On the contrary, she was intensely focused in class, but always on things others couldn't see. Today, however, something felt off. Mila wasn't reading, wasn't doodling flowers like she normally did. Instead, she held her colored pencils with a stiffness that Ms. Doran noticed immediately. On the paper in front of her was a sketch, drawn with astonishing clarity for a child her age. In it, a silver heart locket dangled from a thin chain. Below the locket, shaded with ominous dark strokes, was the face of a man, pointed chin, thin mouth, and deep-set eyes that glared like holes. "It's new," Miss Doran said softly, kneeling beside her. "Who is he?" Mila didn't look up. "He watches through the fence," she whispered. Miss Doran's breath caught. "When did you see him, sweetie?" Mila hesitated. "Last night, and before what?" Mila didn't answer. She simply added a new detail to the drawing, a streak of blue across the man's shoes, shaped like a lightning bolt. Meanwhile, in the administration office, Officer Lin had requested every archived file related to Amy Bellerose. Most of the digital data had been moved to cold case storage downtown, but Principal Drayton still had a printed folder in his locked cabinet. Inside were photos, statements, a list of people on duty that day. None of it had ever led anywhere. The most painful piece, Lin realized, was a photocopy of a necklace, identical to the one they had just found. She matched the engravings side by side. There was no doubt. It was hers. Across town, at the Riversfield precinct, facial recognition software was still attempting to stabilize the frame from Dean's video. It was blurry, shot through the heat ripple of afternoon sun. But something about the posture of the man in the hoodie, his stance, the tilt of his head, felt eerily deliberate. When they tried to cross-reference with known offenders, the system came up empty. No hits, no records. It was as if the man didn't exist, yet Mila had drawn him with chilling precision. Ms. Doran, growing increasingly unsettled, brought the drawing to Officer Lin that afternoon. She says she dreamed it, she explained, watching Lin's reaction closely. Lin's fingers tightened on the edge of the sketchpad. This locket, she said, we found it today buried with the shoe. Ms. Doran blinked. You're telling me she drew something you haven't even released publicly? We haven't told anyone what else was down there, Lin confirmed. This wasn't in any press statement, and Dean's video didn't catch it. They stared at the image together, the way the locket was centered like a clue, and the man's face beneath it, twisted, almost snarling. The most chilling part wasn't the face itself, but the detail, the angular jaw, the creases around his mouth, the exact placement of the lightning bolt insignia on the sneaker. That kind of accuracy couldn't be imagined. You've either seen this man or someone's feeding her details, Lin said. But Miss Doran shook her head. Mila doesn't watch TV, her mom's very protective, she barely even uses the internet. Then we need to find out how she knows what she knows, Lin said, standing. Because this is no coincidence. That evening, Mila's mother, Carolyn, came in for a voluntary meeting. Soft-spoken, meticulous in her dress, she seemed confused when Lin presented the drawing. He's been having dreams, Carolyn admitted. She says there's a girl who visits her when she's asleep. A girl with a pink shoe and a red ribbon in her hair. Lin's pulse ticked up. That matches Amy's description. Carolyn looked overwhelmed. I thought it was just imagination. She's very sensitive. Always has been. Do you believe your daughter is telling the truth? Carolyn hesitated, then nodded. I think she sees things others don't. Later that night, Lin sat in her car with the locket on the seat beside her. Rex lay in the back, restless, his ears twitching at every movement outside. She replayed Dean's video again, pausing on the moment when the man's face barely turned into frame. Then she picked up Mila's drawing and held it beside the screen. The similarities were uncanny. Her fingers hovered over the call button. Dispatch, this is Officer Lin. I need you to pull any missing children cases from the last 10 years within a 50-mile radius. I think we're dealing with something bigger than Amy Bellerose. Behind her, Rex growled softly. Lin turned. Through the window, near the edge of the woods by the school, something moved. Just a flicker, but enough for Rex to sit up, tense. Lin narrowed her eyes. The motion detector lights behind the old shed blinked on. No wind, no storm. Just silence and that sudden electric feeling that the past wasn't staying buried any longer. Detective Nolan Lance arrived at Clarendon Elementary the next morning, under a sky smeared with low-hanging gray clouds that refused to break. He wasn't part of the original case in 2016. He'd only moved to Riversfield 2 years ago. But the moment Officer Lin shared the evidence with him, especially the locket and the footage from Dean's phone, something had tugged at his gut. Something felt too clean, too conveniently incomplete. While the playground was still cordoned off with yellow tape, he asked the school administrator a simple question. Where were the cameras? Principal Drayton adjusted his glasses nervously and motioned toward the roofline. There were 2 surveillance unit at the east and west yard corners. One of them used to cover the maintenance shed. Lance frowned. Used to? They were removed in 2018, replaced by a newer system that only covers the front entrance and hallways. Why? Budget constraints. Maintenance claimed they were faulty. The older units didn't have night vision or motion sensors. Where's the backup footage? I assume it was archived or wiped. The principal led Lance to the IT storage room, a narrow space crammed with plastic bins, tangled Ethernet cords, and dusty routers. Together with Officer Lin, they unearthed an old metal drive labeled CAM16 Toplet. The folders were empty, not deleted, overwritten. Lance raised an eyebrow. Who managed this system in 2016? Principal Drayton opened a file cabinet and pulled out an invoice. Outsourced to a company called Arcspire Solutions. Contract lasted 6 months. They handled the backups and storage. Where are they based? According to this, Nevada. Still active. Doubt it. Their numbers disconnected. Website leads to a blank page. Lance photographed the invoice and emailed it to a contact in cybercrime. An hour later, he got a call back. Arkspire never registered a physical business address, the agent said. The EIN is fake, looks like a shell company. Used for what? Could be anything: data laundering, temp surveillance jobs, black market server rentals. But here's the twist. Arkspire's digital fingerprint matches 3 other school contracts in Illinois, New York, and Oregon. And countless other schools had a child vanish between 2014 and 2006. Outside, Rex wasn't resting. Ever since the discovery of the locket, he had returned, again and again, to the same spot beside the wooden wall of the old maintenance shed. His nose brushed the corner brickwork repeatedly, then backed up, circled, and whined. Officer Lynn, standing a few feet away, noticed the pattern. "He's trying to say something still there," she called over forensic tech Alana Perez, who had brought specialized equipment. "You'll sweep it with UV," Alana said. As the sun dipped behind a low cloud, she turned on the ultraviolet torch and scanned the shed's base. For a few minutes, nothing. Then, faint, almost invisible to the naked eye, a glowing outline began to emerge on one of the bricks. "Is that ink?" Lynn asked. Alana nodded. "Looks like graphite residue. Someone may have sketched something here a long time ago." She pulled out a portable magnifier and gasped, "This is a map." They carefully removed the loose brick, revealing a folded, yellowed piece of graph paper wedged tightly in the crevice. The paper crackled as it opened, revealing a rough hand-drawn blueprint of the school grounds, with strange annotations in blocky print and a red X marked not near the shed but beneath the lower soccer field, adjacent to the bleachers. "Is there a storage unit there?" Lynn asked. "You," said Principal Drayton, who had just joined them. "Just field drainage underneath, nothing major." "That X says otherwise," Lance said grimly. "Get ground-penetrating radar, now." Later that afternoon, the team arrived at the soccer field with radar units borrowed from the County Geotech Division. Lance, standing with his arms crossed, watched as a technician rolled the device over the grass, back and forth like a slow dance. The machine emitted soft beeps, then one loud ping. 4 feet down, the tech said. "Metal density consistent with reinforced concrete or steel plating." "A bunker?" Lynn asked. "Could be an old storm shelter, maybe sealed off years ago." "No records?" Drayton shook his head. "I've never seen anything in the school's architectural plans. But Clarendon's been rebuilt in phases since the 60s. Some blueprints are incomplete." With a soft hiss, a worker began to dig at the marked spot. After 20 minutes of shoveling, they reached something hard, a metal plate covered in rust and dirt. 2 recessed bolts marked the edges. A pry bar was brought in. When the hatch creaked open, stale, wet air escaped like a breath held too long. A narrow set of concrete steps led down into darkness. Flashlights flicked on. Rex growled once, his hackles. Lance descended first, followed by Lynn, Alana, and 2 officers. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom was a room no larger than a janitor's closet, lined with crumbling shelves. Molded boxes lay collapsed in one corner and a discarded tarp sat rumpled in another. But what drew everyone's attention was what hung on the far wall. A corkboard, water-damaged but still intact, pinned with photographs black and white, school portraitile, and all. A few had names scribbled below. Others did not. Lynn moved forward and gently lifted a fallen page from the floor. It was a class list. Clarendon Elementary, 2016. Several names had been circled. Amy Bellaros was one of them. Milla's wasn't. Yet. Then, in the corner beneath a sheet of cardboard, Alana uncovered a locked metal lunchbox. "We'll open it at the lab," she said. Lance stared at it. This wasn't an accident. Someone who had access to. And somewhere above them, Rex started barking. Not frantic but steady, like a metronome ticking louder with each beat. His body facing the back fence where shadows had begun to stretch long into the edge of the woods. The air inside the hidden room was damp and stale, thick with the weight of time and something darker, something that made even seasoned officers hesitate before stepping forward. Officer Lynn swept her flashlight slowly across the room, illuminating the walls stained with moisture, the dust-flecked boxes, and most disturbingly, the rows of photos on the corkboard. Detective Lance leaned in close to examine the names scribbled in uneven ink under some of the child portraits. Many had faded. A few were unmistakably newer, laminated school ID shots taped hastily in a second row. He snapped pictures of everything. Behind him, Alana Paris from forensics was crouched over the metal lunchbox they had found. With gloved hands, she unlatched it carefully and opened the lid. Inside were several small items: faded plastic figurines, erasers shaped like animals, a cloth friendship bracelet stiff with age, and, at the bottom, a folded raincoat, still bearing a sticker tag marked property of Clarendon Elementary. La'ana unfolded it slowly, revealing a navy blue student-sized rain jacket with a cracked butterfly patch on the left shoulder. The inside tag bore faint, smudged lettering. Alana exhaled. It's hers. Beside the jacket, she found a second piece of clothing, more worn, more degraded by mildew. It appeared to be a child's hoodie, light purple with a torn sleeve and a missing drawstring. No visible label. Alana placed both garments into evidence bags and made a quick call to the lab. We're prioritizing this, she told them. Rush DNA match, check it against the 2016 database for Riversfield and any missing persons from surrounding counties. Lynn stood behind her, her voice low but steady. We've crossed into something interstate now. This isn't just Amy's story anymore. That evening, under secure transfer, the evidence was rushed to the state forensic lab for expedited analysis. Meanwhile, Lance requested access to the National Missing Persons Network. Using facial recognition and metadata triangulation, he began connecting the dots between Amy and a disturbing pattern. It didn't take long for the DNA results to come back. As expected, the raincoat contained the genetic markers of Amy Bellerose. But the other item, the purple hoodie, returned a partial match for a child named Marla Jennings. Lynn's stomach dropped as she read the report. Marla had vanished from a small town called Belridge just 40 miles south of Riversfield in 2015. She was 9, no leads, no witnesses. The case had gone cold after 6 months. Her file included a detail that now made Officer Lynn freeze. Marla had been last seen wearing a pair of sneakers with blue lightning bolts on the side. Lynn stared at the report in silence before turning to Lance. This isn't random. Whoever used this room knew the kids, knew their routines, knew how to move between towns without leaving a trace. That same day, Mila was sitting in the counselor's office, coloring quietly under the watchful eyes of Ms. Doran and a trained child psychologist. She didn't look anxious. If anything, she seemed oddly calm, focused, as if she were remembering things she had known she knew. Mila, the counselor asked gently, can you tell us more about the man you drew? Mila glanced up, then looked back down at her sketchpad. He always smells like peppermint, she said without hesitation. Like old gum. And what else? His shoes are white with blue bolts, Mila replied. He says they make him run fast. Doran's fingers tightened around the edge of her clipboard. Has he ever spoken to you? Mila nodded slowly. He said I had a pretty voice, that I should help him carry boxes, but I didn't, because of the dog. The dog? The psychologist asked. The loud one, Mila whispered. The one with fire in his voice. The adults exchanged a look. Lynn arrived minutes later. She had already heard Mila's earlier description, but hearing it again, so clear, so consistent, sent a ripple of dread through her chest. She pulled up an old investigative file and opened a folder marked Unresolved Suspects. Inside was a profile that had haunted 3 jurisdictions since 2014. A man believed to be responsible for 3 confirmed child abductions, possibly more. The name associated with each incident was different, Aaron Phelps Pierce, but each had the same MO, temporary employment through shell tech companies, fake credentials, and a consistent description from multiple unrelated sources. Medium build, thin face, peppermint scent, and always sneakers with lightning bolts. His name, or the closest thing to a consistent identifier, was Aaron Kane. But no one had ever arrested him. No fingerprints, no official ID, just fragments of stories from traumatized children and unconfirmed sightings. Lynn stared at Mila and whispered, "You saw him." Mila didn't speak. She simply turned her drawing around. This one was different. It showed not only the man's face, but a box, open, containing what looked like multiple keys, and beneath it, words scribbled in crooked, uneven letters. He locks them in. That night, Lance compiled every data point they had: Dean's video, the UV map, the hidden room, Mila's drawings, and now the cross-match with Marla Jennings, and built a visual crime web on the precinct's whiteboard. "This guy's not a drifter," he muttered. "He's a strategist. He plants himself. He watches. Then he vanishes." In the far corner of the board, Lance pinned a photo of Mila's sketch next to the now digitized image from Dean's recording. Despite the pixelation, despite the 7-year gap, the faces overlapped like shadows lining up at dusk. Outside the station, Rex sat in the patrol SUV, ears alert, body taut, eyes fixed on the shadows moving across the school's boundary fence as the sun dipped low. Inside the forensic lab, the technician carefully lifted a trace sample from the inner lining of the lunchbox and noticed something embedded in the grime, something metallic, flat, and stamped with partial text. She called it in. Lynn was already on her way back to Clarendon Elementary, unaware that under the rainstorm building outside, something else was preparing to surface. Rain lashed the roof of Clarendon Elementary that evening, turning the parking lot into a ripple of puddles and reflections. Inside the old administration wing, Officer Lynn sat with Detective Lance, both staring at the flattened piece of metal found inside the rusted lunchbox. The tech had cleaned off the grime and revealed a worn visitor ID tag. It was laminated with faded ink smudged over the printed name, Aaron. No company logo, no expiration date, just a barcode at the bottom that no longer scanned. "It's not one of ours," Principal Drayton confirmed, shaking his head as he examined the tag. "We haven't used this badge design since 2012, and that wasn't even our format. Someone made this at home." Lance flipped it over and noticed something etched by hand into the plastic, barely visible unless angled into the light. It read, "Eat, maintenance. Fake department too," Drayton added. "Eat doesn't mean anything here." Lynn glanced at Lance. "You think he's done this before?" "I think he's perfected it." Back at the precinct, Lance requested archived visitor logs from surrounding school districts. It was a tedious process combing through disjointed records, most still kept on paper or in outdated Excel sheets. But after hours of digging, a pattern emerged. In 2015, a school in Belridge, the same district where Marla Jennings vanished, had logged a visitor pass issued to Aaron. The same year, another pass appeared in Halverson County, 2 towns over, at a middle school where a 10-year-old boy had gone missing during an after-school program. His name was Zachary Lang. Lynn, now scanning through forensic timelines, froze when she noticed the gap between each disappearance, always between March and May, always during recess or after-school hours, always at schools that had used third-party IT services. Meanwhile, a nurse at Greenfield Rehabilitation Center, a long-term care facility for stroke and memory loss patients, was reading the local news when a name in the article made her pause. Clarendon Elementary. She walked down the corridor to room 204, where an older man sat quietly by the window, rocking slowly. "Mr. Chase," she said softly, "you used to teach there, didn't you?" He didn't respond immediately, but when she mentioned the word playground, his fingers twitched against the armrest. "There's a police dog," she added. "He found something." 2 hours later, Officer Lynn arrived at Greenfield with Rex. She didn't know what to expect. Mr. Henry Chase had been a science teacher at Clarendon for 20 years before a stroke in 2019 left him with partial memory loss and aphasia. But Ms. Doran had mentioned that he used to be meticulous, especially about safety and schedules. Maybe he had noticed something the day the nurse wheeled him into the activity room, where Rex waited calmly by Lynn's side. The moment the dog barked, a single sharp bark, Mr. Chase jolted. His eyes widened, his mouth parted, and for the first time in months, he spoke. His voice rough and rasping but clear. It's not a staff badge." Lynn leaned forward. "What do you mean, sir?" He blinked, trembling. Then, more firmly, She showed him the laminated tag. He stared, then slammed his hand against the tray table, his whole body shuddering as he whispered, He's not one of us. Do you remember his face?" Lynn asked. Chase nodded slowly. White shoes, blue bolts, smelled like candy, like gum, peppermint. His voice broke, then fell silent again. Detective Lance reviewed the transcripts of the visit that night. That's 4 separate sources, all describing the same man with no official employment trail. He cross-checked the visitor badge against surveillance footage from other schools. In one, from Halverson Middle, the camera barely caught a man entering through the delivery gate, wearing a gray zip-up hoodie and carrying a tablet bag. His ID badge was visible for only a second, but when zoomed in and digitally enhanced, the name read, A. Pierce. Aaron Kane's aliases are all fake, Lance muttered, but the pattern's real. He uses disposable names, ghost companies, and he gets inside as temporary tech support. Lynn asked, but why schools? Because they're predictable, structured, easy to surveil without suspicion. And kids, they trust adults with badges. Rex barked again outside the precinct door, pacing back and forth like he was tracing something unseen. Lynn opened the door and followed him down the hallway. He stopped in front of a closed evidence locker. Lynn tilted her head. That's where the lunchbox is stored. She opened the locker and saw the box sealed inside a plastic evidence bin. When she pulled it out, Rex stiffened. There's more in there, she whispered. They scanned the box again under different frequencies and discovered a hidden slit in the lining, almost invisible to the eye. Inside, tucked between the folds of rusted metal, was a tiny chip of paper. Lynn unfolded it carefully, revealing a partial list of names. Some were crossed out. A. Maze's wasn't. Mila's name, however, was written at the bottom. Lance looked at Lynn. He's still active. And she's next. The realization dropped between them like a lead weight. Somewhere out there, a man who had been hiding in plain sight for nearly a decade, slipping in and out of schools under the guise of harmless tech work, had left breadcrumbs not because he was careless, but because he was confident. Because he knew the system wouldn't catch him. Till now. Until a dog with combat instincts and a girl who dreamed in fragments of memory changed everything. But while Mila slept under the watchful eyes of her mother and 2 uniformed officers assigned outside her home, something, or someone, moved past the edge of the school's outer perimeter, just beyond the reach of the new security lights recently installed. The shadows were longer now, and they were shifting. The morning air was cold and brittle, the kind that stung the lungs and made breath visible in fine white clouds. Clarendon Elementary had increased security since the discovery in the bunker. Uniformed officers now patrolled the playground perimeter while surveillance cameras were being reinstalled in every corner of the campus. Rex was more alert than ever. Pacing the fence line beyond the field, Officer Lynn stood nearby, sipping burnt coffee and watching him carefully. He hasn't slept through a night since the bunker, she muttered to herself. Then, without warning, Rex froze. His ears snapped forward, body low and rigid. He barked once, sharp and loud, then a second, then a third. The timing was too deliberate to be random. Lynn dropped the coffee. What do you see, Rex? The dog let out a deep, guttural growl, then bolted toward the northwest corner of the fence, the blind spot not yet covered by new cameras. The school's security guard, stationed by the delivery entrance, caught movement just beyond the chain link. Someone in a gray hoodie was slipping behind a row of trash bins. Hey! He shouted, taking off at a run. Rex reached the fence first, clawing at the mesh and snarling. By the time Lynn caught up, the man was gone, vanished into the alley that ran behind the school and spilled into a maintenance road near the riverbed. Did you get eyes on him? She barked at the guard. Briefly. Hood up, white sneakers, tall, didn't look back. Lynn scanned the ground. No footprints in the frost, no disturbed leaves. It was like he had evaporated. But something was there, caught in the lower wire of the fence, wedged between the metal and an old post, was a rectangular splinter of wood, no bigger than a bookmark. Lynn pulled it free. It was smooth, sanded, and carved with an old wood-burning tool. The message read, "Tell the dog to stay out of my business." Her stomach clenched. The message wasn't for her. It was for Rex, and that meant only one thing. The man they were chasing knew exactly who was on his trail. He's not just circling, Lance said an hour later when she showed him the wood piece. He's watching. He wants us to know he's close. They began combing through the campus again, starting from the shed and radiating outward in a spiral pattern. Rex led the way, nose down, tail low, hyper-focused. At the rear of the shed, the same place where the map had been found, Rex stopped. He sniffed a section of siding near the bottom, then began scratching, whining low in his throat. Perez arrived with portable scanning tools and tapped on the panels. "Hollow here," she said. Different echo. Lance got down on his knees and examined the edges of the wood. "This is a false panel." With effort, they pried it away, revealing a recess in the foundation just large enough for a man to crawl through. A rusted handle was embedded in the concrete behind it. Lan gripped it and pulled. A metal latch popped open with a reluctant clank, and a section of the shed floor groaned downward, revealing a vertical shaft about 6 feet deep. A narrow ladder descended into a tunnel lined with aged concrete. The air that drifted upward was heavy with mildew, wet soil, and rust. "What is this?" Drayton asked. Aghast, Open lives New York life. They descended one by one, Rex going first, his paws landing silently on the rungs, then dropping to the tunnel floor with a soft thud. The passage was barely 5 feet tall, forcing everyone to crouch. It curved gently to the left, then veered sharply downward. After nearly 30 feet, it reached a junction where the walls grew wider and the air damper. Lalana knelt to inspect the mud along the path. "Footprints," she confirmed. "Recent. 2 sets, one larger, one smaller." She turned her flashlight. "No, not a child. Smaller adult. Lightweight, probably female." Lynn's voice tightened. "Could be the man moving with a decoy, or someone else entirely." The group came upon a rusted metal hatch with bolts partially unscrewed. It opened with effort, revealing a narrow crawl space that led directly to a graded sewer culvert behind the school's eastern boundary. A blind spot never covered by cameras, and one with public access from a nearby park. They emerged into the open air, now misted with drizzle. The metal grate covering the culvert was slightly ajar, the lock broken clean through. Outside the grate, pressed into the mud, were footprints, a man size 12 and a disturbingly, another set matching a standard-issue police boot. Lance frowned. "Someone's posing as law enforcement." He radioed dispatch. "Run a check on any security personnel not accounted for in the last hour." "This guy's—" Lynn turned back to Rex. He was still at the mouth of the culvert, nose pressed to the dirt, body rigid. "Something had him on edge, Rex," she said softly. "What is it, boy?" The dog whined once, then stepped forward into the culvert's mouth and barked. A single, echoing boom that bounced down the tunnels like a war drum. Back at the precinct, the team compiled everything they had. The tunnel meant premeditation. The hatch, the false siding, the external escape route, all of it suggested years of planning. "He built this," Lance said grimly. "He didn't just use an old passage, he customized it." Lynn paced the floor, and he left a message behind, which means he's escalating, he's not hiding anymore. Mila's mother had already moved her daughter to a secure location, with officers stationed around the clock. But Mila herself had grown increasingly distant, more withdrawn, her drawings now full of darker shades, more shadows than people. That night, under the yellow flicker of the precinct's overhead lights, Lance pinned a new photo to the crime board. The wooden warning, its message now enlarged and centered beside Rex's picture and the name Aaron Kane written in bold red ink. Somewhere out there, the man in the gray hoodie, peppermint breath and lightning shoes was watching them work, keeping just far enough to remain unseen, but close enough to know their every move. And while rain continued to fall across Riversfield, soaking the schoolyard and slipping into the cracks of the old culvert, Rex sat outside the shed once more, eyes locked on the trees beyond the fence, ears twitching, tail still, every muscle in his body waiting for the faintest sound of something trying to come back in. The walls of the precinct's child interview room were painted soft yellow, meant to soothe nerves and disguise the truth that every question inside was a searchlight probing memory. 8-year-old Evan Calder sat on the cushioned chair, legs swinging just above the floor, holding a juice box with both hands as if it were a shield. Officer Lynn sat beside him, notepad in hand, voice calm but firm. "Evan, can we go over what happened again?" His eyes flicked up, nervous, then dropped. "I already told you I got lost after soccer. I walked too far near the woods." "That's what you said last month," Lynn nodded. "And we believed you, but now you've asked to talk again. So what changed?" Evan's grip on the juice box tightened. I lied." The room went still. Behind the one-way mirror, Lance stepped closer, arms folded, breath shallow. Did you lie, Evan?" Lynn asked gently. Evan swallowed hard. Because he said he'd hurt my mom if I told anyone. Lynn leaned in. Who said that? Evan hesitated. Then, the man who picked me up. He said his name was Mr. A. He wore a school badge and he knew my teacher's name. He even had a list with kids' names. Lance's jaw tightened. Did he hurt you? No, Evan whispered. He gave me candy and told me I was special, that I was smart. He said I looked like his nephew. But then he said I couldn't go back unless I promised not to tell anyone, that if I did. Lynn nodded slowly. What did his voice sound like? Evan's eyes narrowed, trying to remember. Kinda soft, not deep, like smooth. He smelled like mint gum. That was enough for Lance. He left the observation room and returned moments later with a soundboard they had compiled. He played 5 different audio clips from unrelated suspects, then one final recording, extracted from a voicemail left at Belridge Elementary in 2015 by a supposed IT contractor named Aaron Phelps. The moment it played, Evan's head snapped up. That's him, he said. That's the guy. The voice analysis unit confirmed what they had suspected, a 94% match in voice frequency and tone modulation. Aaron Kane's voice, Lance murmured, we have it, and now we have a survivor's testimony. Outside the interview room, the temperature shifted. The energy changed. This was no longer a defensive investigation. It was a hunt. But the hunt wasn't just occurring in briefing rooms and digital files. That same night, in a modest 2-bedroom house on the south side of Riversfield, Mila Benton stirred in her sleep. Her mother, Carolyn, had dozed off on the sofa, exhausted from weeks of stress and near-constant protection. A baby monitor on the end table crackled with static, then clicked. Mila's voice emerged soft. He's looking again, she said. He wants the locket. Her words came slowly, as if carried from some distant shore. Amy told me. She said he hid something inside, something he needs. It's the key. Carolyn sat bolt upright, rushing into Mila's room. Her daughter was still asleep, brow furrowed, mouth murmuring. The next morning, Carolyn replayed the monitor audio and brought it directly to Officer Lynn. They listened to it twice in Lynn's office, the static-laced whispers casting a deeper shadow than anything the police reports could. She's not guessing, Lynn said. She knows. Can we check the locket again? Carolyn asked. The one you found near Amy's shoe? Lynn nodded slowly. We scanned it already, but not for microscope. Back at the evidence lab, the locket was placed under a new microscope capable of detecting heat-pressed seals. On the backside of the silver frame, beneath the velvet photo slot, the technician found a hidden latch barely larger than a grain of rice. With precision tools, they lifted the layer. Behind it sat a wafer-thin SD card, older than most consumer models but still intact. Lance stood motionless as the tech inserted it into a forensic reader. One file, encrypted, time-stamped April 17, 2016. The same day Amay vanished. The room fell silent as the decryption ran. If this is what he wants back, Lynn whispered, then this isn't just evidence, it's leverage. It's the one piece he didn't expect to lose. Lance stared at the progress bar inching forward, and Mila dreamed about it, which means he's still tethered to her somehow. Psychologically. Maybe more. You see, if he's been trying to reach her, what if he already has? The file opened. The screen turned black for a second. Then came a faint hiss of static, followed by grainy footage. A small, windowless room. A concrete floor, a camera angled from the ceiling. A young girl sat in the corner, knees hugged to her chest, whispering into her arms. Amay. She looked up at something off Hamu and flinched. Then, slowly, a man entered frame, face half hidden by light distortion, but the outline, the sneakers. He knelt, said something inaudible, then smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that comforted. It was the kind that made your skin crawl. We have him, Lance said hoarsely. On tape, with her, in the room. The video ended after 37 seconds. It had no audio, but it didn't need it. The visual was enough to blow open the entire case. Lynn stood motionless, eyes fixed on the frozen final frame. Amay's gaze had turned to the corner of the room, her face pale, her lips forming a silent word. She's looking past him, Lynn said, toward something else. Maybe? Toward the camera? Or someone who was with her, Lance added. We need to check the locket for fingerprints, DNA, anything. We already did that. the tech said. "We didn't swab beneath the housing layer. That's where skin oils might have transferred if he pressed it shut." Meanwhile, across town, Mila sat on the porch of her safe house, sketchpad in hand. She was drawing again, not shadows this time, but a door. An open one, beyond it a sliver of light, and in the corner of the page, drawn in soft brown crayon, was the outline of a dog sitting in silence. Ears perked, waiting. Her mother came outside, kneeling beside her. "Is that Amy's room?" Mila nodded. "She's not scared anymore," she said. "She says it's almost time." Her mother's breath hitched. "Time for what?" Mila looked down, kept coloring. "Time for him to lose." And in that moment, Rex lifted his head from the porch and growled softly at nothing visible, eyes fixed on the distant tree line where movement stirred beneath the branches. The moment the hidden microSD card inside the locket was confirmed to be authentic, the entire tone of the investigation shifted from grim urgency to calculated pursuit. Detective Lance personally hand-delivered the chip to the state's digital forensic lab under escort, where a dedicated task force had already been standing by to run the contents through military-grade recovery systems. Officer Lin waited in the adjacent room, eyes fixed on the opaque glass separating her from the techs, heart hammering beneath her tactical vest. When the file decrypted and the video played in full clarity, there were no more doubts, no more gray zones of circumstantial evidence. There was only Aaron Kane, recorded on camera in a concrete holding room, kneeling in front of a child. Amy Bellerose sat trembling in the frame's edge, her arms wrapped around her knees, while Kane's face, completely visible for the first time in any record, leaned toward her with a grotesque tenderness. He wore the same lanyard badge, the same gray hoodie, and those unmistakable white sneakers with blue lightning bolts. He held a small box in one hand, showed it to her, then placed it behind her on the floor, just beneath the camera's frame. The recording lasted only 37 seconds, but that was more than enough. It wasn't just surveillance, it was evidence. Federal-level, undeniable, criminal evidence. By the time the video ended, the room had fallen into a silence that no one dared break. Then, Agent Grace Mallory from the FBI's Child Exploitation Division spoke. "That's our man, facial recognition just confirmed it. Match with 3 previous artist composites from unrelated states. And now we have him on video with a victim inside a controlled space. He's done." Lance nodded grimly. "Then let's get him before someone else disappears." The FBI escalated the case to Tier 1 priority, triggering a national alert through interagency databases. Within the hour, Kane's image was circulated across every patrol unit, transit checkpoint, school district, and hospital intake system in a 5-state radius. Simultaneously, the federal task force began reassembling every known alias associated with the man. The findings were terrifying. In just over a decade, Aaron Kane had moved through the education and IT support sectors under at least 4 separate identities: Aaron Phelps, A. Pierce, Anthony Keene, and Alex Cray. Each name was tied to freelance or contract work with small districts or third-party vendors, never long enough to leave a payroll trail, always using shell companies that dissolved after 6 months. Cross-referencing business registration data revealed that all 4 aliases had used overlapping addresses for digital mail forwarding, fake office suites from companies offering virtual business addresses. Each domain had been hosted through a now-defunct ISP routed through Nevada, under a parent company called WispTech, which itself had been flagged 3 years earlier for providing IT contracts to schools later linked to security breaches. But the most disturbing discovery came from a deep dive into private mental health facilities. One of the aliases, Anthony Keene, was linked to a now-shuttered psychiatric institution in upstate New York called Briar Creek Behavioral. Officially, Briar Creek was closed in 2014 due to financial mismanagement. But leaked internal memos obtained by the Bureau revealed allegations of unethical testing practices, unregulated pharmacological trials, and at least 2 unconfirmed disappearances. One patient record, partially recovered from encrypted backups, listed Aaron K. with a birth year and background details that loosely matched Kane. The file noted that the patient had been unresponsive to traditional treatment, exhibited obsessive-compulsive patterns around control and ritual, and had a demonstrated ability to mimic institutional structure for deception. The report concluded with one handwritten note: boundary risk, fascination with children not tied to sexual predation, but to idealization of innocence and silence. May reoffend in unstructured environments. That was the last entry before the file was sealed. When FBI techs ran voice samples from Kane's recorded voicemail and matched them to a 2013 internal Briar Creek intake log, the results were conclusive. The same voice, the same cadence, the same obsession with structure and silence. He doesn't just pick schools because of access, Agent Mallory said during the evening briefing. He picks them because they're microcosms of control. Bells, rules, uniforms, hierarchy. He blends in where order masks intent. And now he wants the locket back, Lynn added, because it holds the one thing he couldn't destroy. Mila's dream had been more than a vision. It had been a translation. A message, Ahmed's spirit, whether through memory, intuition, or something deeper, had guided the child to name the very item that unraveled the monster's legacy. Back at the school, Rex returned to the playground for the first time since the hidden tunnel had been discovered. The rain had stopped, and the sky was smeared with a pale gray fog. As children moved inside for indoor recess, Rex sniffed the soil again near the base of the bleachers. Then he growled. Not loud, not frantic, just deep and low. Lynn approached slowly, crouched beside him, and looked under the raised boards. There, wedged behind a rusted pipe, was a crumpled paper lunch bag. Inside was a cell phone, burner type, powered off. It was bagged and brought to evidence. When powered on in the lab, the phone had no contacts, no texts, but one draft message. Unsent, typed and saved. You took the key, you woke the dog. I'm not done. Lance read the words aloud, then looked up at the team. He's still nearby, he's not running, he's watching us. They increased patrol around Mila's home and restricted all school visitor access. Forensics dug deeper into Kane's last known digital trail and found a ping, a library login 2 towns over. The same night Mila had her dream. A forum post under a username long associated with exploitation networks had gone live for 3 minutes, then vanished. The IP address traced back to a public terminal with no camera coverage. But the timing matched the moment Mila muttered in her sleep. He wants the key. Lance stared at the screen. He's trying to communicate. Not with us. With her. In Mila's house, Carolyn sat beside her daughter as the child colored quietly. What are you drawing today, honey? Mila didn't look up. The door is open now, she said. The room isn't dark anymore. Carolyn's fingers froze. Who opened it? Mila shrugged. He didn't. She did. She said it's time. But at that moment, across town, Rex stood suddenly outside the precinct's front step, tail low, head tilted. His eyes locked on the direction of Clarendon Elementary, and the faintest scent on the wind, peppermint. The tension that had been quietly threading through Riversfield finally snapped the morning officer Lynn brought Rex on a routine sweep of the teacher's parking lot. The dog had been increasingly restless since the discovery of the SD card, his behavior more intense, his attention sharper. The wind carried a damp chill as clouds rolled in low over the school, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Lynn was just starting her 3rd circuit around the lot when Rex stopped dead near the far northeast corner. His ears pitched forward. His nose hovered inches above the ground. And then he barked, short, controlled but sharp enough to jolt Lynn's heart into her throat. What is it? She asked under her breath. Rex growled low and steady, then moved in tight circles, nostrils flaring. He darted toward the rear bumper of an older sedan, paws skidding on loose grass. That's when Lynn saw it. Just beneath the edge of the car door. A faint smear of red. Fresh. Dispatch, she called into her radio. Code yellow, possible trace blood at Clarendon staff lot, requesting immediate forensics and missing child cross-check. Simultaneously, a report came over the radio. A 7-year-old student named Brielle Chen had not shown up to her 3rd ed class, and a partial set of small footprints had been found near the loading dock by the cafeteria. Panic flared inside Lynn's chest. Rex, track, she commanded. Without hesitation, the dog pivoted and charged toward the hedge line bordering the lot and the rear of the school. He darted through a narrow gap in the fence and began weaving between rows of maintenance vehicles. Lynn followed closely, heart pounding, trying to keep pace. Rex barked again, twice this time, then disappeared behind a cluster of stacked lawnmowers and rusted paint drums. Lynn found him beside a trap door, polished by debris. Rex pawed at it, whining. Officers arrived within minutes. The door was pried open, revealing a cramped underground crawlspace, dark and cold. Inside, curled in the corner and shaking, was Brielle. Her mouth was taped, but her eyes were open and alive. She was rescued within 5 minutes, rushed to the hospital with only minor injuries. Doctors later confirmed she had been taken no more than 2 hours prior. Rex hadn't just found a lead, he had saved her life. But it wasn't over. Not yet. As Brielle was being treated, a tip came in from a construction worker who had noticed someone matching Aaron Kane's description slipping into a condemned warehouse on the edge of town near the freight tracks, an area long abandoned after a derailment 5 years ago. The building had no electricity, no active security, and plenty of places to vanish. A full response unit mobilized immediately. Lynn and Rex were among the first on scene. Rain began to fall as the team surrounded the warehouse, flashlights cutting through the broken windows and crumbling concrete. The air inside smelled of rust, mold, and rotting wood. "He's here," Lynn whispered. "I can feel it." Rex moved ahead, every step deliberate. In the silence they heard something, a shuffle, a creak, and then the unmistakable sound of footsteps breaking into a run. "He's bolting," someone shouted, and officers scattered. Rex surged forward toward a narrow hallway leading to the back exit. Lynn chased after him, shouting commands into her comms. "Suspect fleeing through East Corridor, Warehouse Perimeter 5. Then came the moment that would sear itself into her memory forever. As she rounded the final corner, she saw Aaron Kane charging toward the exit, hoodie soaked, face set in cold focus. But just ahead of him, Rex blocked the path, body low, teeth bared. Kane didn't stop. He reached into his coat and pulled out a crowbar, swinging it hard. The metal connected with Rex's side and the dog yelped, a sound that broke through Lynn's adrenaline like glass. But Rex didn't back down. Bleeding and limping, he lunged, sinking his teeth into Kane's forearms, anchoring him in place long enough for 2 other officers to tackle the suspect from behind. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Shouts, boots on concrete, cuffs snapping into place. But Lynn dropped to her knees beside Rex, her hands trembling. Blood soaked into her jeans as she cradled his head. "You held him," she whispered. "You stopped him." Rex's eyes fluttered but didn't close. His breathing was shallow, labored. EMTs rushed in, pushing Lynn gently aside. They loaded Rex onto a stretcher modified for canine transport. Lynn rode in the back, gripping his paw, whispering his name again and again as sirens screamed through the night. Back at the precinct, Lance stood in the observation room staring at Aaron Kane's face through the glass. The man sat silently in the interrogation chair, wrists cuffed, blood dripping from the sleeve where Rex had bitten through his arm. He smiled. It wasn't smug, it was something darker. Controlled. Cold. "You lost," Lance said through the mic. "We have your voice, your face, your victims, and now we have you." Kane didn't reply. He simply turned his head, stared into the glass as if he could see through it, and said one word. "Dog." Lance's skin crawled. "Yeah," he muttered, cutting the feed. "The dog that broke you." And as the team prepared the paperwork to transfer Kane into federal custody, across town, in the veterinary trauma unit of Riversfield Emergency Clinic, Officer Lynn stood by Rex's side as surgeons worked frantically to stop the internal bleeding. Her uniform stained, her eyes hollow, her hand never leading his fur. 3 months passed beneath skies that finally remembered how to be kind. And as spring returned to Riversfield, it brought with it more than just warmth and green. It brought breath again to a town that had for too long held itself in silence. Clarendon Elementary stood still that morning, not because of fear but because of memory. The playground had been repaved, the fence replaced, and cameras now watched every angle. But what had changed most wasn't physical. It was the way the teachers looked at the field. It was the way the children no longer ran to the far corners without someone noticing. It was the way parents lingered during drop-off, holding just a second longer. And at the center of all of it, breathing deep again, was Rex. His fur had grown back over the scar that cut across his right flank. His gait was slower now, more measured, but his eyes, those fierce, alert, unrelenting eyes, still burned like they had that night in the warehouse. Officer Lin walked beside him, one hand resting gently on the metal now fastened to his collar. The town had gathered in full for the ceremony. The folding chairs stretched from the base of the gym steps out toward the garden, and not a single seat remained empty. Parents, students, teachers, officers, reporters, even Agent Mallory had returned, standing just to the side of the temporary podium, arms folded. Principal Drayton stepped up first, clearing his throat into the mic. Today, he began, voice steadier than usual, is not only about closure, it's about gratitude, about honoring those who gave us back a name we were never meant to forget. Behind him, a large canvas photograph of Amy Bellerose had been placed on an easel, her smile framed by sun and laughter, her purple glasses just a little crooked. You failed her, Drayton said quietly, but one among us did not. Lin walked Rex to the front. The crowd stood as one. Some clapped, some cried. Mila sat cross-legged in the front row, a drawing in her lap. She held it tightly, her chin lifted with something too steady to be called pride. It was reverence. Respect. Drayton knelt before Rex, then pinned the town's highest civilian honor to his service vest, a silver medallion in the shape of a shield, etched with a single word. This isn't just a medal for bravery, Drayton said. It's for listening when no one else did, for barking when silence weighed too heavy, for refusing to look away. Agent Mallory took the mic next. Thanks to Rex, and to every child who dared to speak the truth they weren't supposed to know, we were able to bring a predator to justice, she said. Huron Kane has been indicted on multiple federal charges, and we are actively investigating his connection to at least 7 other cold cases across 3 states. But today is not about him, it's about Amy, it's about Marla, about Brielle, about every name we must never bury again. Mila rose quietly then, walked up to Rex. It was simple, crayon and pencil, a sky too blue to be real, and 2 figures at the center. A girl with braids rising into the clouds, and a dog beneath her, mouth wide open, mid-bark, facing the sky. Beneath it, written in crooked but determined handwriting, were the words, "I May has flown up." Rex barked loud enough for heaven to hear. Lin's throat closed. She knelt, letting Mila tuck the drawing into Rex's vest pocket. The dog didn't move. He just leaned forward, pressing his nose gently to the girl's wrist. A quiet thank you exchanged without sound. After the ceremony, the crowd followed a path that had been carefully carved through the rear garden, an area once overlooked, now transformed. The school had dedicated it as the Amy Remembrance Grove, designed by students, planted by parents, funded by quiet donations that had poured in once the truth broke. Butterflies made of stained glass lined the pathway, catching the light in dancing shades of violet and gold. Each one bore the initials of a child once reported missing in the state. But at the center stood the sculpture, cast in bronze, nearly life-sized. It depicted Rex as he had been found so many times, seated, calm, ears pricked forward, eyes locked on something unseen. He wasn't snarling. He wasn't lunging. He was simply waiting, alert, unwavering, protective. At his feet, nestled in the curve of his paws, was a single bronze butterfly, its wings slightly lifted as if about to fly. And beneath the sculpture, engraved into the stone base, were the words, "To the one who never gave up on the cries left buried." Children ran past the statue that afternoon, laughter echoing like wind chimes. Their joy no longer haunted. Some paused to touch the base, others leaned in close, as if whispering something only the statue could understand. Mila returned later that evening after most had gone. She sat on the bench facing Rex's statue, sketchpad in hand again. Her mother sat beside her, not speaking, just watching. "Do you still dream of her?" Carolyn asked. Mila nodded. "Not like before, it's quieter now. She's not scared." "Does she say?" "She says thank you. She says she's not the only one he hurt. But now, she's watching us, not hiding." In the fading sunlight, the bronze caught the last light of day, throwing golden shimmer across the grass. Rex, real and breathing, lay beside Lin a few yards away, his tail thumping gently, eyes still alert. Lin looked over at Mila, then at the statue, and finally down at her partner. "You did it," she whispered. "You barked loud enough for all of us." And as dusk settled gently over Riversfield, the town began to breathe again, not because the pain was gone, but because someone, something had finally reminded them to listen. If this story moved you even a little, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one, because sometimes the quietest voices tell the loudest truths. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it Rex's moment of sacrifice, or Mila's dream that unlocked it all? And hey, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches.